Good day, colleagues. I'm Nalini Moodley, Diar, Executive Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Design at the Tshwane University of Technology in South Africa, and I'm delighted to be presenting at this very prestigious conference, and I hope you will enjoy my presentation. The paper is entitled Embodying the Syncretic, Bharatha Natyam in Post-Apartheid South Africa. In 1967, the key text by Frantz Fanon, Black Skins, White Masks, begins with the author discussing the body with its imposition of an all-important racial epidermal schema, which meant that one was responsible at the same time for their body, race, and for their ancestors. Thus, race thinking is a deeply embedded belief that invariably affect and effect behaviors and social practices in bodies that are phenotypically marked. Furthermore, in South Africa today, no statement, no sentence, no gesture can acquire its full meaning and significance without being linked to and invariably qualified by the phenotypical classification of the speaker or the performer. This paper is written from the indices of India and South Africa, establishing a discourse around the classical Indian dance of Bharatha Natyam, as it is situated on the borders of two heterogeneous sites of cultures, creating an overlapping third amidst an ongoing post-apartheid dialogue. An important element in the production of new post-apartheid identities and subjectivities are the collaborations and convergences across cultural, racial, and linguistic boundaries. These engagements are critical as they reflect envisaged anti-racist humanism, which includes all people previously subjugated through processes and practices of colonialism, imperialism, and apartheid. Within the context of apartheid South Africa, racist policies ensured that all those non-white citizens were subjected to live their lives under the apartheid gaze and against the backdrop of difference and segregation. The art of dance permeated all facets of life and really gives expression, visual expression to abstract religious ideas, and it was what was really permeating in South Africa in ensuring the sustainability of the purest form of art in South Africa. Bharatha Natyam is considered the classical dance as implicated as the national dance form of India, and in South Africa it was brought to the country through various dancers who have gone abroad, studied the art form, and then began teaching the dance form throughout South Africa. We have also found that in the mid-20th century, various Bharatha Natyam dance schools mushroomed all over the country with a greater propensity in Durban, where the majority of the Indian South Africans reside. This led to the performance of Bharatha Natyam at probably every sort of cultural religious gathering. But this firstly presents a complex question of culture in terms of maintaining the sense of hybridity against a sense of who we are as Indian South Africans and that sense of identity. Bharatha Natyam is also seen as maintaining a connection with this imagined homeland while also wanting and desiring to be indigenous to South Africa, and in that way looks at this dance form as a particular creative umbilical cord. And then finally, this paper will also look at growing collaborations that are used to reflect on heritage and collective shared histories, which is really critical in New South Africa. With a sense of a culture and heritage and a cultural heritage, and what is this heritage of fusion, really calls into play the different designations around culture, either being ideal, where you discover and describe, or intellectual and imaginative work, or whether it is, and these are descriptions of the various scholars that work in cultural studies, such as Paul Gilroy, Steve Vertovec, Raymond Williams, and they're looking at these very different ways of recognizing social culture, intellectual and imaginative work as culture, and really something that's of an ideal. What is critical for me is looking at culture as a social aspect where the heritage of fusion concerns behavior, a description of a way of life, and how meaning and value is embedded therein. It's really implicit in a way of life, but also explicit in creating meaning in the way of life. When we look at Homi Bhabha and in his text, The Location of Culture, he discusses culture from a perspective of being transnational as well as being translational. And these are critical concerns in his very old text now, but powerful text, The Location of Culture. He claims that it claims that culture is transnational because of post-colonial discourse that is being rooted in specific histories of cultural displacement, like indenture, and in the case of Indian South Africans, and particularly translational because the space or spatial histories of displacement make the question of how culture signifies rather complex. This question of hybridity and new contestations within the questions of creolization, and as such, negotiations and constant transformations of identity emerge. And it is within the site of contestation that Bharatha Natyam is embraced as a space for realization of hybrid identities. The question of a double consciousness, which is something that is exposed in, or a diaspora consciousness, is exposed through various scholars as well. And this double consciousness is something that flows from being both inside and outside the West. And South African Indians were formerly British citizens, and while being inside, they were outside to the protection that ought to have afforded them. And this was clear in their recognition and description of being alien, the alien menace, or the unwanted intruder. When we come to the question of Bharatanatyam, Bharatanatyam was, as I've said, performed at all religious and cultural events, had really a purist culture, and was maintained as pure for fear of being erased, and as indicated earlier, as the umbilical cord to the real motherland. And it became a cultural signifier for the multicultural South Africa, and particularly at the dawn of the new South Africa in 94, became a tool to recognize a desire to be in South Africa as the place of home, and in that way a desired indigeneity. The two dance companies that I've used in this paper to reflect on their dance perhaps in a little more detail was the Surya Langa Dance Company and the Tribangi Dance Company. Possibly the most, or the first most famous popularization of Indian classical dance was in this music video, which I'm sure many are aware of, by Michael Jackson, where he's performed with an Odissi dancer and many other traditional dancers of the world. But this really was a sort of switch in terms of making a traditional Indian art form an internationally recognizable art form. And here, he sort of mirrors the dance that she is performing. And in 94, a very similar sort of venture was attempted in South Africa at the former President Mandela's inauguration, where the assimilation of indigenous art, dance form, and cultural forms was presented into a unique work of art and a work of performance. And here you had Bharatanatyam performed to a song that was very much in the Western style performed by a white singer with a multiracial sort of band with English and Zulu lyrics. And this was viewed by the Indian community with a majority of them viewed it with great disappointment and concern because they felt it had diluted the art form, which was maintained as this really purist art form, and it really misrepresented the community at large and therefore was considered controversial. But it was the dawning of a moment of major shifts. So if we look at these sort of dances, the Tibangi on the left and Sri Lanka on the right, you will see that this sort of fusion of dance styles and the desire for locating oneself within the country, within the culture, allowing and embracing new cultural forms to embed the dance. You found it moved very slowly from Indian female dancers adorned in Bharatha Natyam costume, dancing together with male Zulu dancers who also performed in their traditional and cultural attire. The movements were very much the same at the beginning, with the Indian dancers performing their Bharatanatyam and the Zulu dancers performing their steps. But this slowly merged, slowly moved towards a moment where the dance style started, the lines started being blurred and costume shifts started happening. So you would find the African dancers, the Zulu dancers in their in the Indian and Bharatanatyam style of dress, and the Indian dancers transitioning into the African style of Zulu dance dress. And this sort of slippage is really what Fanon's challenge regarding a fixed identity. So black skin as a marker for cultural identity starts challenging the viewer's understanding of history and culture and tradition and invites hybridity into the discourse of identity construction and really shifts into a position of transformation. The marked shift can now be more clearly seen in more recent productions where there's a negation of a racial purist rendition of the art form or a racial essence. And we move between the polarized race groupings of the apartheid structure. And here you see a hybrid dancer who's now seen as the original alien, an Afro-Indian space, straddling that which is existing between Indian and African and locating oneself in the presence of Africa. Movement between what was possible and a recognition of each other, recognizing each other's equals, and at arriving at an empowered syncretic, a hybridity, a lead to authentic communication and true understanding. And in conclusion, the recognition really through this idea of dance and through the Bharatanatyam space, how identity becomes mobile and this ability to move through difference towards assimilation and interculturalism. And this type of dancing can lead to erasure of cultures, the invisibility of cultures, and create a manufactured false sense of inclusivity. However, when we are put together, we exist as a cultural, as a united form, exist as a sense of oneness, existing with multi-cultures, it is an indication of a desire perhaps to be indigenous to the culture, which is now the place of home. I thank you very much for your time and look forward to engagement.